Hi everyone, it's Helen here from Bodywork-Pilates, and today is day 6 of our 12 days of Pilates. So we're going to crack straight on. Think we know where we're starting from. I'm going to turn side on so that you can get a better view of what we're doing, but we're placing our weight into the very center of the feet. We've got that feeling of slightly lifting pubic bone to open up those hip creases, to elongate but not flatten the curvature of the low spine. Hands rest at the side of the body because we're open across chest and upper back. We want to take a slight draw back through the chin, so we press down firmly in order to lengthen up, creating that sense of opposition, that rebound effect of pressing down to lift up. And from here, we just gently sway forward and back, and we sway forward and back in order to try to recognize that switching on and releasing of the natural engagement of the pelvic floor, of those deep abdominals, of those waist into back muscles. So muscle that we call transversus abdominis, TVA, is really active at this point, but honestly, you don't have to remember the names. So just think of it as a corset that wraps around, that does the strings up at the front of the body, that feeling of slightly drawing those hip bones closer together, of slightly tightening that area from belly button down to pubic bone, and bring it back to center. So at center, let's just start sliding from side to side. So with no rotation at all. And of course, we must also consider the breath. So the breath in through the nose and out through the nose or the mouth. Now, whether you choose to breathe in into that expanding side as you side bend and out as you come back, or whether you choose to breathe out on the sense of drawing down and then in as you come back to center, I'm going to leave that entirely up to you. As I keep saying, it's important that you don't fight your natural inclination. The weight stays in the very center of the feet. We place that breath into the fullness of the rib cage. So this might make more sense to you if you think about it, to breathe in as you side bend so that you can really expand into that lengthening side. But, just don't hold the breath. That's the main thing. Just don't hold the breath. And bring it back to center. And let's move into our foot pedals. So knee bends in line with second and third toe. Opposite arm lifts, shoulder is down. Chin is still drawn in, crown of head is lifted. And then from here, we just switch from side to side. We rise up, find balance for a moment, and then back down. Rise up, find balance. We do that without moving the weight too heavily from side to side. So just be careful about traveling as you do this. We want to avoid traveling if we possibly can. Shoulder, of course, slides down as the arm comes up. And just taking that arm more or less in line with the corner of the eye, and that'll become a little bit more important when we come to do our backstroke in a moment. And then bring it all the way back down. So from here, we move to the front edge of the feet. We work across the fullness of the foot bar, the toe bar. We lift those arms, we squeeze those heels, we find our balance, we bring it back down. Now at this point, turn the palms back, turn the head, slide the shoulder blades towards each other, keep those ribs drawing in. Those abdominals are still slightly tightened. We've got that little corset just wrapping around, perhaps noticing that corresponding lift of pelvic floor. Just notice whether you have any tensions, tightnesses, strains as you press those arms back and turn that head. Looking to just ease some movement into some of these joints and bring it back to center. And we move into those hip creases. So those hip creases either side of the pubic bone. And again, that's going to be important a little bit later on in our program. So with a slight softness in the knee, perhaps with the arms just resting or across the chest, maintaining that same length through the back edge of the body. So those curves at the back of the neck and in the lumbar spine, they don't change. Those abdominals continue to gently draw through, and we keep that breath moving into our rib cage. You want to feel that there's some effort through the hamstrings, but particularly through the glutes as you come back up again. Just one more. And then all the way back up and release the arms and give the shoulders a little bit of a roll forward and back, a few times in each direction. Maybe you want to just swing out those feet as well, just because you've been standing. Okay, and let's go into our squats. So once again, feet are about hip distance, but you might need to adjust that depending on the makeup of your hips. We do that slight hinge from the hip again, so we just do that little hinge, okay, and then sitting the bottom back as if we're going to sit on a chair but change our mind, pick up a box from the floor and then squeeze it all the way back up again. So again, we're maintaining that same length through the front and the back edge of the body, remembering what we've said previously about our bony landmarks. And really squeeze through. Use those glutes as you drive back up again. So by the time you get to the top of the movement and open up those hips, glutes should feel like they're pretty active. Now, it's not about touching the floor. I've said this before, so don't try to overdo it and then have to round through the back. Keep those shoulders down, glide the breastbone forward, maintain that length in the back of the neck so we don't need to look upwards. And then again, drive through. So we're trying to get the hips down as low as possible. Now, some of you might be able to take your hips much lower. And certainly if you adjust your feet, you might find that you get much lower as well. But it's all about technique, the length of that spine, the strength through that lower body, and bring it all the way back up. Lovely. Okay, give that a little shake out and then move into your tandem stance. So we're taking one foot forward of the other as if we had our feet right up against the edge of a curb. We're going to bring those inner thighs together. We're going to have those hips facing forward. I'm going to vary this today actually because we've done this a few times. I'm going to give you a little variation on a theme today. The weight comes through, the chin is drawn in. We find that little bit of balance. So as always, if balance is your issue, then just stay here. You don't need to go any further if you don't want to, if you're not ready. Take both arms forward. Now we've been doing one arm sweeping back. Now from here, allowing your ribs to turn, just now, ooh, immediately off balance. So now just let your ribs flow from side to side as you sweep those arms forward and back. I'm so bad at this one. I clearly need to do this more often. My own balance on this is terrible. There you go. Now you might have just done what I've done, and that was to sit all of my weight into my back leg. So try to keep the weight as evenly placed as possible. Readjust when you need to. Reassume the position. That's it. Oh, now of course, remember, if that little bit more dynamic movement doesn't work for you, then you can just stick with the arms sweeping forward and back. So you could do a few of those instead if you want to. Otherwise, with a little bit more of a fluid action, a little bit more flowing, and then back to center, shake it out. Okay, I'm going to assume that that was my wobbly side, and this is not my wobblier side. So let's go one forward, one back. Once again, get that nice straight line. Remember, if you need to, you can go slightly wider. Maybe I should have done that. With your foot in line with your big toe as opposed to your foot in line with your foot. But try and keep the feet nice and straight. Now, once again, think about opening up, but not overreaching those bony landmarks, front edge of the body. Hip bones are pulling up slightly. Want to feel that length in the low back. Chest is open, upper back is open, chin is drawn in. We're not pushing the head forward. If you need to, stay where you are. Otherwise, arms can come forward, and you can either take, remember it's forward leg, forward arm, same arm I should say, and you could do a few of those, or if you wanted to, squeezing the inner thighs together. You could, immediately threw myself off balance, you could do a little bit more of a fluid movement that allows the ribs to just flow from right to left, arms moving forward and back, shoulders of course drawing down. Now I've said this before, but balance isn't about being perfectly still. Balance is about recovering your balance when you wobble. That's what's really important. Just keep that going. So if I was as steady as a rock, which I'm clearly not, if I was as steady as a rock, oh, I can't even stand up today. So if I was as steady as a rock and I wasn't moving at all, then that would be great, but I'm not particularly challenging myself. I've got to a point where I'm not getting any better. When you wobble and you have to recover, that's what we want. We want the body to have to react to the instability and bring it back to center and shake it out. Oh, I don't think I like that one anymore. All right, when you're ready, come down to lie on your mat. So laying yourself down onto your back as we move into our next movement, which is our backstroke, followed by our knee floats, and then we're doing double hip roll. That's our new movement for today. So the back of the neck is long. We press the pubic bone forward. Remember, a little something behind the head if you feel your gaze is too far back. Hands onto the floor at the side of the body, hips nice and still. So just take a moment or two to get that position, feet and knees in line with the hip bones. But by pressing the pubic bone forward and opening up those spaces as you had when you were standing, you will naturally create this curvature of the low back. And you will probably find that you absolutely naturally start to recognize how the body has slightly engaged. So those deep abdominal muscles I was talking of before, that TVA muscle, plus others, you'll feel that slightly drawing in. Okay, breath is still into the fullness of the rib cage. Forgot all about my breathing on the previous exercise, too busy trying to stay upright. And from here, pelvis level, ribs soft, arm back, opposite leg forward. Small gap between arm and floor, small gap between heel and floor. Looking to lengthen away. If you have any shoulder restrictions and you find this difficult, you can take your arm more off to a Y. Okay, so we want to stay within a range of movement that we can control, that of course doesn't cause us any pain, although sometimes we might not necessarily be completely comfortable. So keeping that slight tightening corset, that absolutely still pelvis, that soft rib cage, and the length in our limbs, that's what we're looking for. Now perhaps you might want to take both arms back as one leg extends forward. There's an option. Don't have to, adds a little bit more weight into it. It does take away the whole worry of what does opposite mean, which sometimes can defy us. You might want to point and flex your feet, so you can play around with the point and a flex of the feet as well if you wanted to. But it's not about getting the heel down to the floor. It's not about getting the hand down to the floor. Your arm just goes in line with the corner of the eye. Otherwise, the likelihood is that you will shift out of your shoulders and you'll start to move around your ribs. And back to center. Let the hands rest. We should be back exactly where we started from. We've not changed this pelvic position at all as we move into an alternate knee float. So we're just looking to bring that knee directly above the hip, and we're trying to do that without feeling that we fall over to the side to do it. So we've got to stabilize that pelvis. It's almost like we set the pelvis in stone. And again, notice, pay particular attention, and perhaps even slow it down. If you slow it right down and pay particular attention to what it feels like to take that foot off the floor, there comes a point where it feels like you're pulling your foot off the floor as if it was a magnet and it was glued to the floor. Each time the foot comes fully back down before we lift the other side. So we're just doing a single lift here. Now, I might add on to that in futures, but I just want you to be able to do this a couple more times, that's all, before we add on any further weight. Okay, so we haven't changed these positions. Our ribs are still exactly as they were in line with the hips, and the breastbone and the pubic bone are still in the same relationship as well. So even as I bring my knee up, there's a sense that I'm slightly pressing my pubic bone away. So again, we've got that little bit of opposition that allows us to hold the body in position. Okay, and then bring it back down. All right, moving on to our next movement. I'm just going to shuffle back a bit because it's quite important that you see my feet on this. Okay, let me move my little cushion. Okay, there you go. Okay, so there's my feet. I want you to bring your feet and your knees really together as if you had put both feet into one shoe and both legs into one trouser leg. So they're kind of bound together. And that's going to be quite important. Now, we want to keep the upper body completely still, not rigid, but just still. Take the arms out to the side, turn the palms up, and just let the arms rest there. That will help to open up the shoulders and give you a little bit more connection into the ground. So I'm going to take my knees over to one side. I'm going to take them over to my left, okay? And as I take my knees over to my left and I move my weight from the right side of my pelvis to the left side of my pelvis, I'm keeping my upper body still. Hopefully, if you see the camera, you can see that my right leg is completely sat on top of my left leg and my right foot is connected and supported by my left foot. So I'm only resting now on the outside edge of my left foot. My knees are still glued, and then I'm going to bring it back to center. I'm going to change sides. So both knees roll over to my right, my left leg completely held and supported by my right leg. I'm only resting on the outside edge of my right foot, and then back to center. Okay, so it's not about getting your knees all the way down to the floor. It's about going as far as you comfortably can before you have to start lifting out of your ribs as well. Okay, so as much as possible, keep those ribs glued down into the mat. So lightly engage those abdominals. Think of that corset wrapping around. Relax those shoulders. Glue the inner edges of your legs and feet together. And then inhaling as you roll your knees over to one side, just over onto one side of the pelvis, and then engage as you bring it back, exhaling. And change sides. So this is your double hip roll. And again, we can add on to this as we go on. So maybe when we've done this a few times, we might add on something else as a variation for those of you that want to add it. But this will always be your fundamental move. If you have any issues and this causes your back to become uncomfortably painful, I mean, obviously painful we never really want to do, but perhaps just reduce your range of movement. So you might just take a small range. Imagine if you're on a clock face. My knees start at 12 o'clock and I'm aiming to take my knees over to, I would say between 9 and 10 and between 2 and 3. Okay, but I'm certainly not going to 9 or to 3. But maybe for you, it's just to 11 and 1. So reduce your range of movement if you need to. Okay, there's no prizes for this. It's all about the quality of your movements. And then bring it back to center. Release those arms. Walk your feet as wide as your mat and just drop your knees in together like a little teepee. And then just let your knees roll from side to side. Now they won't stay together. So that's just a nice, easy way of releasing. And then carefully rolling over onto the side of your body, pressing through the hands and coming up. Because there you go. That's day 6. And I will see you again tomorrow for day 7. Take care.